Hi, we're Justin and Saddy Frazier, and we have been attending Beacon Baptist Church for about 2 years. And last May, we discovered that we were pregnant again with our second girl. And the pregnancy went great. Everything was awesome. The doctor said it was all textbook. We had a textbook baby, and that we had nothing to worry about.
The day before she was born, I had an ultrasound because of her heart rate being a little low, and everything seemed to be fine. I actually went into labor that night, and she was born on January 1st, 2016. And when she was born, she wasn't breathing, and we have had another baby before, and we kind of know how it goes. You know, they start crying after a few seconds. Adalyn was blue. She wasn't breathing. They brought her to me, and they were trying to help her and taking all the gunk out of her mouth, but they immediately realized something was wrong, so they took her over to the crib, and we didn't really know what was going on. We're just sitting there watching, and in just a matter of minutes, they had the whole team coming in and over her, and they took her away to the NICU. A few hours later, Justin came back with the doctor, and she explained to us that we had a very sick baby, in her words, and that she was going to have to be airlifted to UNC Children's Hospital.
She had a very severe disease, which was more of a deformity. It's called congenital diaphragmatic hernia, which is caused by a hole that is formed in the diaphragm. And when that occurred, all of the intestines and her liver and lower abdominal organs were escaped into her thoracic cavity, smashing her right lung and pushing her heart over to the left. When I arrived, I was able to see her hooked up to several machines. I had no clue what was going on, and I went back to pick up Sadie, who was discharged the same night, and we went and we stood there over our newborn, what was supposed to be absolutely perfect baby, and didn't know what to do. The surgeons came in and the doctors came in, and they were explaining to us that our child was the sickest they had. What she was diagnosed with had an extremely high mortality rate. More babies die from it than leukemia every year, and that they were doing everything they could for her.
She was doing so well that the nurses and Justin convinced me to go home and spend the night with Emery, our firstborn, and I did, and Justin stayed at the hospital till 4 a.m. that day. Well, at 6 a.m. I was up and ready and showering, getting ready to go to the hospital, and I received a call from the nurse practitioner, and she said, Sadie, I want you to stay calm, and I need you to, get in the car and get over here as soon as you can. And Adalyn's not doing well. We're gonna have to take her down to the PICU. When I got there, all the doctors and the surgeons and the nurses were standing around my baby, and my husband is sitting there, and they didn't even know how to explain what was going on. There was such a look of hopelessness in all the doctors, and it's really hard when you have people who know so much, and doctors who are so knowledgeable, seeing and looking at your baby and looking at you that way, and just kind of hugging you. And some of them were actually crying themselves, and they told us that they needed to get Adalyn off of the oscillating ventilator, which was a stronger one, to be able to get her down to the PICU. They explained that many babies in her state don't actually make it to the second floor. They die in the elevator, and they wanted us to be in there with her. We didn't know what to think. We didn't know what to say. I remember just going to the bathroom and crying and asking God to just save my baby. I really lacked faith at that moment. I forgot that I serve an all-powerful God. I did. And I went back in there. We spent a few minutes with her, and we prayed with her. There was a peace that came, and I know that was the Lord. And I know that, you know, the Bible says, ask and you shall receive. And at that moment, that was very proven, because we were about, I mean, we were just sitting there. Our baby could die any second. They were gonna turn off the ventilator and see how she did. She could have died in front of us. And from somewhere we received just this grace, this power, this peace that you know, if he took her, that was his will, and he would glorify himself through it. And if he kept her, he would obviously glorify himself through it. So we stood there and we were crying, and we actually went into the elevator with her, and she did great.
She did not just have a congenital diaphragmatic hernia, which would be normally just a hole. What she was actually diagnosed with at that point was called anagenesis, which means she had no diaphragm on her right side at all. We had another family meeting. Dr. Weiner came to us, and he sat us down at a conference table, and he explained that this is what we were afraid of. And he said, there are several things that we can do to save her now, but they may not work. He explained that we have this procedure, and then we have this procedure, because that procedure probably won't work, and after that procedure, then this procedure, but that procedure may not work, and this is the last procedure that we could perform that we think might save her, if and when she has a long road ahead of her. And so he said that he asked us if Emery, our firstborn, had met her yet, and we're like, no, she hasn't met her. He's like, then you probably want to bring her in today. That was hard to hear. So we brought her in, and she got to see her for the first time in person. She blew her a kiss.
They explained to us that in her surgery, it would entail for them to actually create a diaphragm for her with Gore-Tex, which they were going to attach to her rib, because there was no tissue whatsoever. At this point, we had seen God work so much. We were trusting him. We were able to pray with her. We kissed her. They had told us it was going to be a 5-hour surgery, about 5 hours. And after 2 hours, our nurse came in and she said, I heard they're closing. Those days before her surgery, and when we found out that she had no diaphragm, I had been asking God to give her a diaphragm. He forms us, you know, in the womb, and he creates the diaphragm from 7 to 12 weeks of life. And I said, God, you can do it whenever you want. And I begged him. I was on my knees, and I'm ashamed to say I've never prayed this hard in my entire life. Just a few minutes later, the surgeon comes in with a huge smile on his face, and he says, we're done. She's good. And we both stood up and we're like, what happened? What's going on? It's only been 2 hours. And he said, well, let me draw it for you. And he goes to the board, the whiteboard, and Pastor's right there with us. And we're nervous. We're like, okay, well, he's smiling. What's going on? And he draws her, you know, her little anatomy, and he says, well, there was actually a diaphragm. There was almost a whole diaphragm. There was a hole the size of a dime, and the repair ended up being a primary repair, which is actually the more rare repairs with CDH babies. Usually they're a little bigger, you know, than just, you can't actually attach the diaphragm to itself. He didn't even have to use the Gore-Tex. The diaphragm was almost complete. Pastor started crying, and we were just like, we started hugging each other, and we could not believe that the Lord had created that diaphragm that we had asked for. We were waiting for her to get better, and we found out she was actually having seizures due to a stroke she had. So she had an MRI done, and when they saw that MRI, they saw that the stroke she had was due to the her left carotid artery was narrow, and so when they snipped her right carotid for the ECMO, which they actually snip in half and they insert the cannulas, when they decannulate, they just sew the ends. They don't sew it together, they don't repair it. We knew that was going to be a compromised artery, and her left artery was actually narrow, and that caused a stroke. Well, on her second MRI, just a few days after that, they saw that her left artery, which was initially narrow and what caused the stroke, was normal. There was normal blood flow. And they actually noticed that her right carotid artery, which was snipped at the time of ECMO, when she was placed on ECMO, was working, blood was flowing through it as if it had never been cannulated, had never been severed. They did not understand. I could not believe it. I asked them to repeat it probably 4 to 5 times. I asked them to write it down because I said, well, is this normal? Does this happen? You know, has this happened before? They said, no. We don't really know how to explain this to you. We don't know how to explain this. I immediately started crying again, and I said, well, I mean, the God who gave my daughter a diaphragm at almost a month of life, or before, whenever he did it, just fixed it because he wanted to.
She has some nerve damage in her throat, and because of that, she has completely lost the use of half her vocal cords, which is obviously keeping her from eating, and she still cannot really speak, and she struggles to swallow. And that's what we're facing right now. We're not out of the woodwork yet, and I think one of the most significant things that we've learned while undergoing this trial is that, you know, faith in one moment, or in the beginning even, doesn't carry you through however long the storm might last. We've learned that it's a step by step, it's a moment by moment, and we've seen God prove himself every time that his word is true, that he is who he says he is, and that he has had this planned long before Sadie and I even had met each other, and knew we were going to have a baby girl named Adalyn who had CDH. And we know that because of this, as the Lord's used in our lives, that we can trust him to give us the grace and to give us the strength, not because we're anything, but absolutely because we're nothing, and that we need him to help us overcome these things in our lives.
And today, our baby, Saddy Frazier, who no one thought would even make it through the night, through the next few weeks, and if she did, they at least thought she would need a trach or oxygen, is breathing on her own without oxygen support. And like he said, we still have a few hurdles to face, but she's healthy.